What's going on, everybody? We are back once again with another edition of Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast. It is Thursday, November 23rd. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody here at Wrestling Republic. Wants to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Absolutely. Have fun on Turkey Day with your families. Without question, I apologize for the delay here on the show. Had a little technical difficulties on my end. That's on me. But no worries. We're ready to go. We're here to talk about Dynamite. We're here to talk about the Continental Classic. And most importantly, it's not just Thanksgiving Thursday, it's Throwback Thursday, and we're going to get into War Games. It's just two of us rolling old school style on a Thursday, a Throwback Thursday, the original Throwback crew. Happy Thanksgiving, Shot. We miss you, bud. But we will see you tomorrow. But most importantly, I got to introduce my co-host for the day, the head of opinions all the way out in Philly, Anthony Ricciardi. Thank you for joining me this morning, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And this is the OG throwback crew because unfortunately Shad couldn't join us. So we got a jam-packed show and we're going to be covering a lot of history with War Games.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get into it. We already got a comment here from our good friend Numero One Superfly. Good morning and happy Thanksgiving. You as well, my friend. Yep. Have an awesome one. Let's talk about the Continental Classic.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Swerve versus Jay Lethal. We had Jay White versus Roosh, and we had John Moxley versus Mark Briscoe. Let's talk about Swerve and Lethal first. I was actually shocked that Lethal was the matchup, but what a great opening matchup. And man, is that elbow drop still good. Lethal still got it when he drops that elbow. I got to say that. But I think the right guy won. Swerve Strickland's firing on all cylinders and may very well be my pick to win this tournament. Anthony, what'd you think of that match to start us off?
I absolutely love the matchup. Jay Lethal, although the way AEW is promoting him now, he's like a lackey to Jeff Jarrett. Jay Lethal was one of the longest reigning Ring of Honor world champions of all time. He is a phenomenal talent. So to put him in there with Swerve, that's instant classic. Swerve coming off arguably one of the best matches of the year with that brutal Texas Death match with Hangman. The momentum is 100% on Swerve's side. I agree with you, Clark. Looking at this bracket, Swerve is, in my mind, the odds-on favorite to win this whole thing. Granted, it's early yet, but looking at the brackets, I don't think anybody deserves it more in that bracket than Swerve.
Absolutely. It's hard to deny just the momentum that he's been able to create over these last months, and especially given that match. I mean, that match was vicious and everything landed. It was well thought out. It wasn't vicious for vicious sake. It made perfect sense in every way. And I think to put that cherry on top of the Sunday that was already built over the last few months with Swerve Strickland was absolutely brilliant. And the right guy won in that situation. As great as a job as Hangman Page did building that rivalry, the right decision was made in having Swerve Strickland win that match because they both come out looking like absolute warriors. We got another comment here, though, from our good friend Bobby Petito. Happy Thanksgiving, Bobby. How are you? Thank you so much for tuning in on this Thanksgiving Thursday. And then we got another one from my mom, Lori Taylor. Happy Thanksgiving. Grateful for the exceptional Wrestling Republic covers. Thank you, Mama. We're grateful for you. Love you. And then one more here from Bobby, which is Swerve Strickland versus Jay White. Will be a great match for the Continental Classic. There's almost no question. I really like that matchup. And speaking of Jay White, Bobby, let's talk about Jay White versus Roosh. Say what you will. I thought this of the three was the most average of the matches, but Jay White is still in a position where he's a big time name, and what he's developed with, the Bullet Club, Bang Bang Gang, whatever you'd like to call them these days, has been solid. Another situation where I think the proper guy went over in Jay White. I enjoyed the match, but of the three, I thought it was kind of the least competitive in some ways. That's neither here nor there. Anthony, how did you feel about that match?
Yeah, Jay White, I've been a fan of for quite a while. So yeah, I fully agree that he was the right guy to go over. I know Ben doesn't agree with me on this. I am not a huge Roosh fan, and I've never been. And I think part of that is I don't think he sells well. I think he wants to get his stuff in, but he doesn't really sell for anybody else. I think his best match was against Bryan Danielson, and that was because of Danielson, not him. I think in a lot of ways that comes out when he's not in there with somebody the caliber of Danielson. Jay White is a phenomenal talent, can get a lot out of people, but Jay White was the right choice for this, I think.
I agree for sure. It made the most sense, and I can see exactly where you're coming from on the Roosh thing. I think he's a very talented performer. There's no doubt about it. His moveset is violent. It's cool. He's got an amazing look. I don't know. I agree. There is some sort of disconnect. I don't know if it's that, the selling or just in-ring psychology wise, because even like in promos with the language barrier, he still does come across as a menacing figure, an intimidating figure. And he's got the charisma in that regard, without question.
He has the look, he has the charisma. I just think in that ring, his selling is just not there. I don't know what it is. It feels like he wants to get his stuff in and he wants people to sell for him, but when he has to sell, it's not as well.
I have an interesting theory about that too. I wonder, because of where he's wrestled and stuff, if he just has a hard time in AEW with the idea of TV wrestling. Because in the arena, it doesn't seem to come across as as disconnected as it can at times on camera, right? And I'm wondering if that is maybe part of the issue, and there's just some learning curve stuff as far as wrestling on live TV.
Well, it's the American style too. It's the American style too, because, especially in Mexico, it's very video game-esque.
Right.
And in the States, it's more slower, methodical storytelling, selling moves and stuff like that. I get it. There's an absolute learning curve there.
100%. And speaking of methodical, this match was anything but methodical. We had Jon Moxley, as our good friend Cardi Cornett likes to call him, John the Plumber. He's not John the Plumber. It's Jon Moxley. I love the guy, the Wild Thing. The entrance still gets me every time. It's one of my favorite things in wrestling right now. I just like the song a lot, and I love the movie Major League. So hearing that once a week never bothers me. And then we've got Mark Briscoe, an absolute legend. Absolute legend in this business. Redneck Kung Fu was on full display last night. I love seeing it. I think you do too, Anthony. This is one of those matches that just deserved tournament next to the name. It was a classic back and forth banger. He kicked out of a Death Rider. What more can you ask out of these two? Just an absolute slugfest. Did you love this one as much as I did?
Yeah, I did. This is one of those ones, you think about Moxley against either one of the Briscoes, which I don't think they wrestled against each other at any point. Moxley against either Briscoe.
I believe that's correct.
Even on the indies, but you think about it, like the rivalry that like Moxley could have had with Jay Briscoe, and the rivalry he can have now with Mark, like just the hardcore style, like those two could bring a lot out of one another. And this match really delivered. To me, it was a dream match that people may not have realized it was a dream match, because the two of them, their styles are very similar and they can go. Ideally, you kind of thought Moxley was going to pull this out. Again, this is, Ring of Honor people really don't get the rub against AEW people. Which is a shame. But Mark is somebody that I thought they could have done a storyline, getting him to the world title, especially after with Jay. It is the one title that he has not held. He didn't hold the pure, but like realistically, he's been a tag champ. Jay held the world title, but now they're doing away with that. They're doing the Triple Crown thing, which I'm not a big fan of that personally. I know that's not on this topic, but I don't like the fact that they're doing away with the Ring of Honor world title. Even though they haven't really portrayed Ring of Honor the way it was pre-Tony Khan, there's still a lot of history with that, and I'm not crazy about doing away with it.
That would be my only complaint, because I actually like the concept as far as the Triple Crown title is concerned, but that would be my only complaint as well. And we got a comment again from Bobby Petito. He likes Mark Briscoe and he still misses Jay Briscoe. Man, we all do.
We all do.
Jay, an absolute legend. Yes, Bobby, could not agree more with that sentiment. And the ROH world title, I love the concept, but I wish it wasn't the ROH world title almost, right? Like it just...
Well, the other thing that I'm a little confused with, they're merging the New Japan Strong one.
Right.
Tony doesn't own New Japan. He owns Ring of Honor. Like, if for whatever reason, if the New Japan AEW relationship sours,
right,
are they going to quasi strip 1/3 of the 2/3 title? Like,
you lose. What are they going to cut the leather off?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, the moment I thought of this,
it's just like 2/3 of a title.
Well, I thought, yeah, we're going to cut our like a divorce court thing.
They just cut it, cut the belt.
Well, the thought I had was
some guy in New Japan ends up with like a strip of belt.
here's your piece of leather. You're good. Yeah. I thought of if Swerve won this thing, all the visual in my head is going, okay, if you're carrying 3 belts, is Nana the AEW Paul Heyman with Roman with the titles? Like, I just want to
with 2 belts.
I just want to see Nana do the thing with like the belts, like, and just like
with 2 belts around his shoulders. That would be worth the price.
That's what I'm saying. Like, is he going to just carry the belts for him? Like, at this point, I'm like, I already want Swerve to win this thing, but then the visual in my head popped with Nana, and I'm going, oh my god, I want this just for that.
It's literally perfect.
By the way, how great was that entrance with Nana at Full Gear?
It's unbelievable
with the dancers. Like, that is so underrated of how good that was.
It was perfect. Yeah. Prince Nana has impressed me so much. The craziest part to me is I remember Prince Nana from watching ROH back in the day and everything. And ironically, actually, I just learned recently he was and I was listening to it when it happened. He was the very first ever guest on Busted Open Radio.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the craziest. And I was listening to it in 2009 when it happened and just never made that connection in my head. And then Mark Henry called in basically on the same show, who's now a co-host of that show. But looking back at his career, where did he go for like a decade almost? Well, and what were we missing? Because talk about a talent.
That's one of the things, because he was not in Ring of Honor when they closed. Like that, like he was not there. And he was not there for a while. So I don't know if he was working indies. I don't know if he retired from the business and then came back. That's the thing I don't know. Like, I don't know where Nana went, in between those periods.
Absolutely. And then we got another comment here from our good buddy, Bobby Petito. And he goes, imagine if Prince Nana went to New Japan Pro Wrestling with Swerve Strickland. I think that'd be fun, of course. And we've got, we do still have the working relationship. I think that's something that, we'll see them head over there, maybe for a Wrestle Kingdom type of thing.
I can see that.
Also for Forbidden Door, the matchups you can have with Swerve Strickland and the roster over at New Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, come on, like Strickland Ospreay, let's go, right? Sign me up.
I mean, that could easily be the all-in match. We've speculated that they could go that direction.
Yes.
Realistically, coming in, Ospreay will be coming in roughly for Revolution March. By that point, the quote-unquote Triple Crown champion will be crowned. Whether or not Ospreay sets his sights at Revolution for Swerve with that Triple Crown, that's entirely a possibility.
It is for sure. And we got another comment here from number 1 Superfly that cracked me up. For some reason, if the New Japan Strong was replaced with a regular belt, I'm imagining Prince not out dancing with the regular belt. I agree. Yes, that image is better than the current belt for sure. And then Bobby Petito with Gates of Agony are currently in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which yes. Sign me up. I'm in 100%. But with that, let's talk about our next topic of the morning. I almost said the evening. It is still 8:40 in the morning here in California, guys.
It's still morning for me too for the next 20 minutes.
Fundamentally speaking, you got 20 minutes left of morning, but we have I'm the number 1 Hookamaniac. Everyone knows that. The Hookamaniacs were running wild last night. The Hookster was out there doing his thing with Orange Cassidy, Shibata against Jake Hager, Daddy Magic, Matt Menard, and Cool Hand Angelo Parker. And we got one of me and Anthony's absolute favorites returning. Very, very nice. Very evil.
Very evil.
Danhausen. How much fun was this 6-man and the return of Danhausen, Anthony?
Danhausen's one of those ones that like he's a guilty pleasure. He is absolutely hysterical. Something that I don't think nobody knows. When Clark and I decided to do Sold separately, which at some point that will come back in 2024. Clark and I are still trying to figure out the logistics on that. One of the things Clark sent me was a cameo from Danhausen. Wishing us luck on the show. So we always have a special place for Danhausen. But yeah, no, this was an interesting match. I enjoyed it. It was a fun match. Like it was nothing that was groundbreaking or shocking, but for a fun little 6-man tag, yeah, this came off really well. Danhausen did his little stuff outside the ring. I am kind of curious if and when they're going to have him wrestle, especially since he keeps getting injured. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun little match.
Absolutely. I popped for the hat. I mean, how could you not? I popped
and
for the hat.
The hat and the curse, yes.
The hat and the curse is just classic Anthony Housen. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love Danhausen. Orange Cassidy looked awesome in this match.
He did.
Shibata's spots in this match were as crisp as I think I've seen him in an AEW ring in like this 6-man type setting. He's always great in singles competition.
Yeah.
But I thought actually Shibata looked outstanding and like in great shape. The chops were laid in. It was exciting. And Hook is getting better every time he goes out there. I really do love Hook and see a lot in Hook. But in all seriousness, in my eyes, he gets better every time he goes out because speaking of unique movesets, the amount of suplexes that he's capable of and those judo throws are no joke, and they look really cool. He makes a basic arm drag look like an arm drag and a hip toss combined, and they're very safe moves, but they're just smart and cool, and I love the moveset.
He really needs the right opponent really to match up with him. Like my only concern with Hook long term is who you put him in the ring with. Because I think if you put him in there with somebody like a Wardlow, there's a believability factor.
Right.
That's an issue.
He is starting though to fill out. I noticed that.
No,
myself.
but you know what I mean. Visually, there's that issue that he has to deal with.
But that's the thing is he's put on some weight, and I think a little bit like Nick Wayne, we forget he's going to get into his mid-20s and get put on 20 pounds of muscle because of nature, right? Yeah. And if he adds on top of that, I don't think Hook is going to be built like the kind of skinny guy we saw him debut as for very long, right? I think Hook is going to only get bigger. I see him almost getting to, I don't want to say Stone Cold Steve Austin size. That's big, but close.
I think Hook, the thing is, I'm curious. I want to maybe see a heel version of him at some point. Like I could see him in Orange, especially with that international title, them feuding over that, like a heelish Hook. He might be able to pull that off. I'm not saying do it now, but down the road, that might not be a bad move.
Not bad at all. I wouldn't mind that in the least, and I think him and Cassidy could have a great feud.
Yeah.
That would be a blast, almost without question. I think my only concern there is I feel like the Hook is too easy to cheer for right now because of he's got this weird, like he's a kid. He's got the red rum. He takes himself seriously as a character, but there's still like an odd comedic aspect to Hook in a way.
Yeah.
Where he's almost like, it's not like he's making fun of himself at all, but just, it's like, maybe it's even because of the send Hook thing that CM Punk said, but there's just this, right? The action Bronson hits and like, there's like just this like layer of slight comedy that's like
there's an interesting part when you look at like Hook and you look at Orange Cassidy. They're both very similar in the laid backness.
Right.
Hook though, he could legit do these things. Like it's like he's got that judo background. He could beat the living crap out of you.
Yes.
OC, the gimmick is that, he's quiet and could wrestle. But like Hook legitimately, and especially because who his father is, you're like, okay, Hook could probably go. Like, I think that dynamic weirdly works because Hook, OC, and, for example, Danhausen, they're all outsiders.
Right.
They don't fit in with the cool kids.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? So I think that's part of the appeal from the audience, where they could relate. And I think that works.
And I even agree, even further, it's funny, of like Hook, OC, and Danhausen, of that group, kind of, Hook does feel like the one that would be like the cool kid that hangs out with, right?
He's the cool kid, and he also is the one that, like, if the other two were picked on, he's the one that steps up.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, and he's the dude that doesn't step up until you start to bug him.
Yeah.
And then he's the one that slams you on your back, right?
Yeah.
Which I do. I dig that dynamic. But speaking of things that I dig, Toni Storm. Toni.
Yep.
Toni Storm, I'm going to give away for the very first time in my life an award. Toni Storm is my Toni of the week this week. Without question. Winning the championship. Sorry, Anthony. Normally you are up there in the rankings. It was a tough decision, but Toni Storm is getting the Toni of the Week award from me this week. She's timeless. The performance at the pay-per-view, yes. The promo last night, yes. Accepting the title belt as if it was an award that she hadn't already won.
Yeah.
It is golden. I don't know who she's working with writing wise. If she's coming up with all this on her own, it's one of the best storylines. It's one of the best to just flip a switch too. And I enjoyed Toni Storm's work in AEW for the length of the time since she's been signed. This is another planet heard from, and it's so good. It's parallel in my eyes to Swerve. These are the two best things going in AEW, and I would lean as hard as I can into both if I'm AEW. Do you agree with me on that one, Anthony?
Toni Storm is without a doubt doing the best work of her career. When, she was drowning in the Outcasts, the group that, AEW's version of the NWO, the female stable that really didn't work. Like, realistically, it didn't work. And you're like, could any of these people crawl out of this hole that's been dug for them? And she not only dug her way out, she's way up there more than she ever was before. And in a lot of ways, I want to say she's almost like AEW's female version of Goldust, with the pure Goldust from the original run of The Artist and, the Over the Top. And it really works with this. Having Luther as her butler, having RJ City playing, which RJ I think is very underrated on how well he's helped get this over. And having him and Renee introduce her like it's an award show. Like, this was so well done. And I'm sure there'll be people like, I didn't like it. Well, at the end of the day, it is entertainment. Some people may like it, some people may not. But if you take it for what it is, the over-the-topness, and knowing kind of what things are being referenced, like the Marilyn Monroe type gimmick, it's working, in my opinion. She is the most interesting of the women's wrestlers going on in AEW. She's the only one with like a real character. Like, the other ones are wrestlers, but they don't really necessarily have characters. Toni's got that character. The way they're portraying it is working, to me, incredibly well. And if the first feud is Sky Blue, which they sort of teased because she interrupted her, I think he could do well with it. I wouldn't take the belt off of Toni this soon. Whenever they do take the belt off of her, I think you gotta go. She has like a mental breakdown type stuff. Like, she's delusional at that point. Like, even more so than usual. Yes. Like, almost like an actress that thought they were going to get the Oscar and they lost. Like, that type of stuff.
I'm blanking on the movie, but what is the old movie about the actress that does I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeVille, because she freaks out. It's about the actress. She murders the guy in the pool. Oh man, it's a great movie too. It's an absolute classic, but that
I
know you know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly. I know exactly what we're talking about.
It's one of my favorites. It's really bugging me that I don't remember the name. Bobby Petito in the comments also said that he could see Sky Blue being Timeless Tony Storm's first challenger for the AEW Women's World Championship. Yes, absolutely, Bobby. And then we got another. Well, you looked that up really quick, Anthony. We got another great comment here from number one Superfly, which is, "This might have been me, but did you by chance hear fans chanting 'what' to Tony Storm? Kind of strange for the fans to chant that to her." I will address that one really quickly, Anthony, and then give me the answer on this.
Yep.
I thought actually, this is interesting. It's a Chicago crowd. I'm a Chicago dude. Chicago crowd is very hardcore fan base. A lot of people in that crowd were very aware that Christian is the inventor of the "what" chant.
Yes.
He left the voicemail on Stone Cold's phone, and the "what" chant started, and Christian kind of caused them and allowed them to happen during his promo. And I think that's why we heard them the rest of the night. I would actually not blame Tony on that one, or even blame Christian. It was a unique thing, but knowing Chicago for what Chicago is, once they were starting to chant the "what" chants, it wasn't going to stop. And I think it had a lot more to do with that than necessarily like their thoughts on Tony Storm or anything like that. Anyway, okay, what's the movie?
Okay, it is Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard, yes. One of the absolute classics. And that character, you know what I'm saying? That style of just absolute delusion.
Yes.
She was a silent film actress, right? And then they add sound, and I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeVille, and it's the police because she just committed murder. It's one of my favorite scenes in movie history. It's just actually genius, and it's an old movie too.
Yes, 1950s.
Yeah, 50s movie. But with that though, speaking of 1950s. This has nothing to do with the 1950s, but let's talk about Maxwell.
Such a smooth transition.
Jacob Friedman. Adam Cole returning wearing the double clothesline shirt in the Bulls lettering in Chicago. Nice to see good old AC out there. That never gets old for me. And Samoa Joe. This promo, I loved. I thought Joe did as good a job as almost anyone has done standing toe-to-toe on the microphone with Max last night.
Oh, yeah.
I was blown away by that. And I expect it from Joe, knowing how talented Joe is, but I was blown away by his performance on the mic. How did you feel about Anthony? Are you excited about Joe being the next challenger?
Yeah, I like it. Joe, to me, when he took on Max at the Arthur Ashe show's Grand Slam, I remember saying on the show, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that might have been the throwback I hosted when you were out of town, Clark, if I don't remember. For some reason, I think I was hosting. But I was like, Joe, to me, would be believable. Joe would be believable taking the title off of Max. And I'd be okay with that. Because Joe is such a phenomenal talent. I love Joe going, I take care of my things. No one's going to touch you until I want you 100%. I want no excuses when I beat you. I love that because Joe does have that intimidating factor to him. I am curious if at any point Wardlow makes a run at Max before World's End and Joe steps in because we know those two have history. So I'm curious to see where that goes because they keep teasing the Wardlow thing, which, by the way, I know it's a side note. The headbutt that Wardlow gave in the back to AR Fox may have been one of the worst headbutts I've ever seen. I'm like, you pre-taped that? Like that if that was pre-taped, you should have reshot that. It didn't look good. But and Adam Cole has history with Joe too from the NXT run. So there's a lot of history with the people involved in this, and I think it's interesting. One of the other things that we wanted to bring up, we saw the Devil again. This time, though, we actually heard the Devil. Now, I believe from hearing it, it is the person who I originally mentioned on this show, who I thought it would be. It sounded like Jack Perry to me. That laugh sounded like Jack Perry. And I know I'm not alone on that because the internet kind of blew up where everyone thought it was Jack Perry as well. I don't know if AEW is going to change course based on Backlash because really it could be anybody until that mask comes off. They could switch it. but I think it was Jack Perry last night.
100%. And that's the funniest part to me is everyone's kind of speculating on who's actually under the mask. I don't think who was revealed is under the mask every time. There's no way. I
think it could be changing multiple times. I think a perfect example, and you may remember this, when WWF did the higher power with Vince.
Yes.
People speculated. Bruce Pritchard went on record and went like, we had nobody in mind. Like, we were doing it, but there was actually never a person. Because I remember as a kid, and I don't know if you remember this, Clark, people were insisting, or at least maybe it was a schoolyard thing, but when he did the moment where Austin's tied against the ropes and he reveals himself to Austin and only Austin,
yeah.
I remember we're thinking it had to be Shawn Michaels. And I know there were other rumors, Christopher Daniels and that, and like Bruce Pritchard was like, no, it wasn't. So I don't know if that was Vince during that moment or not. And I don't think I don't think they've ever actually said.
It would be kind of funny if like no one was under there.
Well, it had to be somebody.
Well, I guess technically he had to see a face.
Yeah, I mean, he had to see somebody. But
it's even I think about like even recently too, Retribution. Like there was like 50 different members of Retribution at different points, and then like they picked some.
Yeah,
and they're like, wait a minute, Mustafa Ali too. No, it didn't work. But not the point.
Yeah.
This one I do think actually they got a better shot at. But I agree with you. I'm not even sure they've decided who it is yet. Let's now talk about one last match of the night, which was a triple threat. I always dig three-way matches. We had Sky Blue, Ruby Soho, and Anna Jay. Right? This was an awesome match in my eyes. I love, as a Chicago dude, the fact that Sky Blue gets featured in Chicago so heavily, and the crowd absolutely loves her. She's got the hometown thing going. It's completely delightful. We got a comment before I toss it to you really quick, Anthony, but from Matt Williams. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Matt. Thank you for tuning in. Absolutely. Hope you have an awesome day with your fam. But Anthony, we had Blue, Soho, and Anna Jay. There's some Julia Hart involvement and everything. What do you think about Sky Blue as potentially the next challenger for Toni Storm?
I like Sky Blue. I think they can absolutely do something with her. I've always liked Ruby Soho, but she seems like the runner-up no matter what promotion she's in, especially in AEW. 3 times they've made her runner-up for something. So, but now they're doing like a love story with her. This match, personally, I didn't really care for it. I thought it was very clunky, and there was a lot going on in it. And I don't really know if it showcased the talent of these 3 women as best it could. I thought there were moments that, it was pretty decent. But Sky Blue, to me, out of the 3, is probably the one they're going to push next. At least that's they've been using her. I'm curious to see what they do with Ruby Soho. I really hope Ruby gets a title at some point and is not just a runner-up constantly throughout her career. But Sky Blue against Toni. See, that's the thing. On one hand, I could see giving her the title, possibly pulling the upset, because that would set Toni Storm off over the edge. But at the same point, I don't want them to hot potato the title either. So I don't know. It's kind of weird in this situation. I don't know what direction you want to go with this, but I could see them feuding next, though.
I agree completely on the feuding thing. Here's the way I see it playing out personally. I think you have Sky Blue have a great rivalry with Toni Storm, get just this close. I mean, so close, and not win. And then the time to do it is next September in Chicago at All Out. That's when you pull the trigger on Sky Blue winning the championship. I think that's the time you make that call. She's earned it and has more time to even elevate herself further than she already has. I think that's the route we go. Personally, Anthony, on that one.
No, I agree with you. I think you could, she comes up short. Luther's probably going to interfere.
Yep.
Like maybe she's close to winning and Luther sneaks Tony's foot on the ropes or does little things, and you can kind of like build towards it. But I think if you do it, I think in Chicago is the right move. And if Toni has a breakdown, I'd almost take Toni off TV for a little bit. Like after she loses it, and you could have like RJ City seeing her in a straitjacket, like a padded room, like she's really losing it. Like you could play that up. I think you could do well with that.
100%. We got another comment here from Matt Williams, which is runner-up Ruby Soho is kind of fire. LOL. I actually agree.
It's not the first time I've said that.
I think Ruby's great. No. Ruby's awesome. So I totally agree with that. But let's actually get into our Throwback Thursday topic, Anthony. Let's do it. We've got 2 Americans here on Thanksgiving, so we're not going to be able to fully hit the war games, but we're talking about war games. Not just war games, though. The history of war games, which dates back to Dusty Rhodes, WCW. It's a Thanksgiving tradition like turkey is. I'm excited about it. They're speaking of Chicago, in Chicago this week. Love that city. Anthony, give me this war games history. Break it all down for us. Let's have a lesson in history from Anthony Ricciardi right here, our head of opinions.
Yeah, War Games is one of the matches that, there's a lot of things Dusty Rhodes created in this business. War Games may be arguably the most iconic of all of them. It is a match that has been an inspiration for others. It started in the late 80s. In Jim Crockett Promotions under the NWA banner, eventually went to WCW when that got absorbed. The 2 rings surrounded by a cage. It's a match that really was built on the backs of heel teams like the 4 Horsemen. And then eventually the NWO. Dusty is an iconic member of that history of those matches as well. So was Sting, which, by the way, although we're not covering Sting directly, today is actually the 9-year anniversary of him making his WWE debut. So there have been so many moments. And the one fault, I guess, of the War Games match back then in the WCW NWA period was the roof, which there was a roof, was very low. And I think that's why WWE really didn't want to do the same War Games. They wanted to do a twist to it. There was a long-held belief that Hunter, Triple H, tried to make a push to do War Games in, I believe, 2002, because at that point WWF owned the rights to it. And the rumor has always been that Vince didn't want to do it because Vince didn't create it. And that's how we got the Elimination Chamber. That was like the compromise. But you think a match is Hell in the Cell, the Elimination Chamber, AEW's Blood and Guts. They're all inspirations from the War Games match. One of the things, and Clark, I don't know if I ever told you this, WWE actually lost the rights to War Games before they actually ended up using it. What? Did I ever mention that to you?
I did not know this.
Okay, so, they got all the rights from WCW. A couple of them lapsed, which is why, Cody was able to register, I believe, Bash at the Beach, Slamboree, because WWE let them expire. They let War Games expire. And the company that actually ended up buying it was MLW, because MLW did a couple War Games matches. And then WWE went to them and actually had to buy them back, once they started to use them. But, it's a match that was iconic for many years. The last one was in 2000 under WCW. It was 17 years before WWE actually used it, and Triple H pushed for it in NXT. So it was 17 years, and that match kind of got built by, in the same vein of the Horsemen and NWO, the Undisputed Era. Undisputed Era really kind of helped elevate the match. I'm on the fence on roof or no roof, because obviously the roof would be higher now in a WWE one. For nostalgia purposes, I really love the roof. I personally, I would want the roof back on. That's me, but I know they're not going to do that because they're doing different things and like their own little twist on it. But I prefer the War Games with the roof, which is why I think the Blood and Guts visually, that cage actually looks better to me than the WWE one.
I agree in some sense, although I will say I've always had an issue with the recent cage match because we've seen every finish. We've seen the door. We've seen the climb out. We've seen the broken wall. We've seen every cage match finish.
Yeah.
To me, the cage around 2 rings with no roof just allows for more unique spots that we haven't really seen.
Exactly. I got you.
That you wouldn't, because you can't win by escape.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? And so I don't necessarily mind the no roof, but to your point, for nostalgia's sake, my memories of War Games consisted of a roof. And I remember, like, the old War Games cage, that roof was low. To your point,
too low.
It was real low. Although, interestingly enough, the Hell in a Cell roof is real high.
Yes.
They've raised the roof again on the Elimination Chamber, right?
Yeah.
The low roof actually might make this the most interesting thing ever, because there's some room to play with some stuff with a low enough roof if it's designed to withstand, right? That I wouldn't mind. Actually, the low roof, in my eyes, might be the play if you're gonna go roof at all.
Well, I think one of the most iconic or embarrassing moments of the War Games match was, I believe Sid was in one. Right. And he went to do a power bomb, and like the guy was bumping heads. I think it might have been one of the Road Warriors with bumping heads.
He like touched, he scraped the top of
it. Yeah. But one of the things to point out, and I want to mention this, is this Saturday when Cody Rhodes steps into the War Games, his first War Games of his career, he becomes technically the 4th member of his family to be in a War Games match.
Wow, I did not think about that.
Because Dusty, obviously the originator of it, Dustin was in one. Yep. Technically, his uncle, the Shockmaster, was in one.
Right.
So he's the 4th member of the family to be in it. Like, just emotionally for Cody to be in a match that his father created.
So cool.
That's such an awesome moment for him. One of the other most embarrassing moments of a War Games match of all time was in WCW. You remember Colonel Parker, the manager?
Oh, goodness.
He was in an all-white suit. Now, if you go back and look it up, I don't remember which year it was. He had an accident, and it was very evident on the white pants. I'm just going to leave that there.
It was obvious.
You know.
And then also, I'm trying to think. I'm like, the Abdullah the Butcher in the chair match was not War Games, right? That's a different.
I believe that was Chamber of Horrors.
That's Chamber of Horrors. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, they elected, which I believe was Halloween Havoc in Philly.
That's right. That's right. Anthony, Matt has a great comment here. 1 second. I wish there was an elimination aspect to War Games. I do too. I think it should come down to the final 2, 1 in each ring, which is such a great moment, but only do it one time. Don't do it every time. Do it one time.
You know what I would do personally if I'm doing that? You do the War Games match. It can only be won by submission, but you have to get each member of the team to submit.
Oh. That's kind of Blood and Guts has a little bit of that too, because
but it's only one person submitting.
They verbally submitted in Blood and Guts. When Eddie was going to catch it.
The camera didn't catch it.
Yeah. Either way, though, I love the concept. I love the match. I'm excited for this weekend.
Do you remember? I believe it was the Horsemen against the NWO, and it was I believe the Kurt Hennig heel turn, but they threatened to smash, I believe, Flair's head in between the door.
In the door.
And it got the other members of the team to submit to protect Flair.
I'm trying to remember too. Am I correct on this? Didn't Warrior, when he was in one War Games, and they filled both, like, the whole cage thing with smoke? And it was just like, you can't even see anybody anymore.
I don't know if it was that show, but they didn't tell anybody that the trap door was there, and that's what led to British Bulldog's injured back. Because he landed on one of the Warrior trap doors in WCW. I don't know if it was the War Games one, but it was one of his returns. I believe it was that. I believe it was that one.
Dang.
I believe it was that. But I remember one of the WCW ones it was Team WCW against Team NWO versus NWO Wolfpack. They had
100%.
sets of teams, which is really insane considering how small that cage was with that many people.
Oh no, it was full by the end of it. We got another great comment here from Matt Williams, which is I wouldn't mind one pin once everyone enters, but if you get pinned before everyone enters, you're eliminated. That is a fun concept. I think you could play with that, Anthony. That is actually a fun idea.
Well, I do think one of the funniest things is, they always talk about the advantage of the War Games match.
Right.
The heels always get the advantage. Like
Yeah.
like a few times I think they didn't, but like realistically,
I think the only one that didn't have the advantage was the Bloodline.
It might have been.
I
Yeah.
think the Bloodline were technically the heels and they didn't have the advantage.
And they're letting fans vote for the women's one, which realistically, if it's a legitimate poll, in theory, the babyface women's team this Saturday should get the advantage. But personally, the heels having the advantage makes sense to get heat. Like it makes sense why they get the advantage every year.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got one more even in the comments here from Matt Williams, which would lead to heels getting a pin when they have an advantage. And then if babyfaces go over, they overcome the odds. If the heels win, they have the numbers advantage. I totally dig it, Matt. I think we both are in agreement on that. It's a great concept.
It's the Survivor Series team type aspect brought to War Games, because Orton's famous for being a sole survivor of teams. Like they could have done it, but there are ways you can play with the War Games, but it is such an iconic match.
100%. And I'm super excited for this weekend. But with that does bring us to the end of the show. Please have a happy Thanksgiving. Spend time with your family. Enjoy it. Be grateful. It's one of my favorite days of the year. We will be back tomorrow at the normal time. So that's noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, 8 in the UK, 9 in Hawaii. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, happy Thanksgiving on behalf of me and Anthony. And we'll see everybody soon. Enjoy your weekend.